Where do you want to start, cousin?
Okay, I want to start with your first job that you ever had. Go through your work history.
The first job that I had, I must have been something around 12 or so. I don't think I was 13 yet. And I remember I looked around. I tried to get a job as a newspaper carrier, that used to carry a route. Birmingham Age Herald. Couldn't get that. Apparently, there were others who, during the summertime, which was when I wanted to work, had already gotten to it or had come over from the preceding year. Anyway, couldn't find it. My father, as I remember it, knew some people over at the Thomas Mines. That's just in Jefferson County in Birmingham. And we went over there to see if I could find some work. I don't think that he actually thought that I would be working in a mine. I think, well, they had a commissary, there. They had an office there, and he figured that I would be doing something up there. So he asked them. They said, yeah, they thought they could find something for me to do. It was 7.5 cents an hour. I went back. They told me put on work clothes. Well, I didn't have any work clothes, but I had old clothes that I played around in, so out I came. I had a bicycle.
The same one you talked about with
that I had put my radio on later. That was,
right.
I don't remember now whether it was before, but I think it was after this experience that I put it on, that I made me a little radio with cat's whiskers and galena, and with this container that you put ice cream in. It was a round container, and it had a top that turned around, and it was flat on the top, and you could fix it up. And I tied the earphones into it with a couple of paper clip things, the bronze ones, that you push through the paper and spread them out, and that held it into the paper box. And that's what I made the radio thing. But anyway, so I go out there, and they say, it was, if I remember correctly, it was dark when I got out there because it was bright and early. And I have the impression it was like 6 or 7 o'clock shift, bright and early there. Anyway, I get out there, and they said, yeah, go with this man, and this man was one of the miners. He was the crew leader, as I remember. But be that as it is, we walk over there, and we go to where the shaft is and get on the elevator, and down we go. With me, this is a real experience. I'm enjoying it. I don't know what the hell I'm getting into, but I found out before too long. I wound up being what they call a breaker boy, and one who go for it, a gopher.
Right.
When they needed any kind of water, I remember I used to have to drag that water, and those damn things were narrow, and you couldn't stand up. After a while, you could walk in the chambers, and then after you got to it, then it came down where it was narrow. It was, I guess 2.5, 3 feet tall. The seam, and then you started sliding, and you're dragging the water can along with you, and you get to where they're working. They've dug out, and sometimes they've dug a chamber, and sometimes they're still just that. And I think I got part of my claustrophobia from that damn thing. But anyway, the carbide, I remember they would have beside pickaxes, they would have these crowbars that they use there, and all kinds of tools that I had to go dragging, or that they had left somewhere, or go up on the surface and then come back down again. But going up on the surface, though, they were particular about who was riding the elevator and how many times the elevator went up and down. Because I guess they were figuring the cost of electricity or whatever it was, and we had to sort of time it so that when I had to go up, that the elevator was going up, or some other reason it was going except for me. And there were several boys there, all of them kids my age, none of us was 16, who were down there, and we divided off with different crews because it wasn't just one seam, but it was several seams underneath there. And I worked during a summer. Well, I'm trying to figure. I believe it was 2 summers that I worked at it. The second summer, I remember having problems with my dad. He wasn't at all happy about it. But I worked, and I got my pay. They paid every 2 weeks. And at the end of the 2 weeks, you would go by the commissary where the pay window was, because the office was right next to it, and they paid us in scrip. I thought I was going to get paid money, and I wind up getting paid in scrip. And the scrip you can spend at the company store. But trouble is, the company store, the prices were out of this world, and they didn't have anything that I wanted there. I wanted money. I didn't want to buy something at the company store. And I found out there that when they paid us off and we got in the payroll line, we got our money, so there was the installment collector for the insurance company, the installment collector for the clothing company, the installment collector for the furniture company, whatever. Everything was installment. They'd be lined up, and as we came away from the payroll window, we were paying them. Now, they would give us 90 cents on the dollar for scrip. And I learned from the others there that what they did, because they couldn't use the scrip either, they would cash it in with the company, and I understood that they would get 95 cents and the company would get 5 cents. So they would, by giving us 90 cents for the scrip, made 5 cents on it right quick, and the company made 5 cents on it. So if I was getting 7.5 cents, I never could quite figure out how much it actually amounted to, because it wasn't 7.5 cents. Right. As I remember it, we at that time worked 10-hour shifts. That's why my dad didn't like it, because I was there bright and early in the morning. I'd get through coming home late. Now, one thing that they did have that Thomas Mine was better than some mines is that when we came up and out, they had a place there where we could shower to get the coal dust off of us, because otherwise, I remember my mother got after me a couple of times because I didn't wash myself too good, and she said I had dirt on me. And she said, "You're just as black as the night is out there." And she wasn't happy with it at all. I suspect that if I'd have listened to her, I wouldn't have worked more than that first week or 2 weeks at the most. But that was the experience I had. I worked with the Thomas Mine. And I guess I could have continued working through my high school years there. But my recollection was that instead of, I believe it was after 2 years in the summertime, I had begun to work in downtown Birmingham in one of these installment houses. They besides selling furniture, they sold spreads, pillowcases, all this other stuff on installment, 50 cents down, 50 cents a week. I remember the amount was very, very low. I never could figure out how you could turn around and sell it and finally get your money. But I guess the markup was so good that they were able to do it. I worked at this place right across the street from Sokol Brothers Furniture Company. They were a big furniture outfit there. And my job was, they figured I didn't know enough about it to sell, but my job was to hold the customer. In other words, customer came in, can I show you something? They wanted to see whatever they wanted to see. I would take them over there, and they would ask me questions, and as I remember, I didn't know enough about it, except if I looked at the tag, I could tell what the price was, or if I looked at the tag on the blanket or the pillowcase or the spread or whatever, I could read that, and I would hold them, and then if they'd want to know something else, I'd tell them, wait a minute. I'd go back and I'd find somebody. Sometimes it'd be one of the regular salesmen. If I couldn't get a salesman, and I thought we had to get somebody to talk to him, do better than I could do, I'd get one of the people who were behind there, either, I guess you'd call them bookkeepers, who used to receive the payments, because on the weekend, on Saturday, that was a big day at that time. As a matter of fact, if I'm not mistaken, I started coming in some on Fridays after school, and because they would stay open then, because some people got paid on Fridays, but most people got paid on Saturdays. And Saturday morning would be a little quiet, and then it'd start picking up, and that Saturday afternoon, everybody was coming in. Primarily poor white people, poor blacks, who were buying things on the installment plan, probably paying 2-3 times the price that they would have gotten it at a department store, but they didn't have any other credit. And part of the, and I can remember part of the thing that I would do is that if people came in and made payments and they were good payees, and I was standing around, there was no customer there, and I would hear them talking to the lady or the man who was there taking the money and writing up the receipt, and they would tell them, sure, don't you want to buy something else? Your account's getting down low or something. As they were walking out, I remember I would talk to them to see, don't you need something else? Did you see this new thing that we'd gotten? There were several things that were new that'd be over there on a certain area, and I would try to see if I could interest them in it. And it was part of the way that they did business was that they would try to get them to continue to owe them all the time, never be out of debt, but always be buying something, and that way they established a good credit. And I suspect that if in the final analysis it worked out good for both for the people running this place of business and for them, because otherwise they couldn't have gotten it. It may be true they may have paid more, but in the final analysis they were able that way to get things to make their places look halfway decent. That's the story of my first jobs. And beyond that, when I went to, the last year in high school, when I decided that the thing for me to do was to see if I could get a scholarship so I could go to college, because the folks didn't have any money, and things had gotten bad in Birmingham, and my folks had gone. He'd come up to Patterson, couldn't do anything, and my father got into business with a couple of friends of his in kosher meat markets. And I helped him, and if you have never picked the feathers off of chicken, and they have, in the summertime, they have lice on them too, and you begin to get them on you. And that's what I did. I would, as we call it, flick the chickens, take off the feathers of it. I would help run errands around there. And then things were getting real bad, and because there was an epidemic among the chickens at that particular summer, I remember. and people were not buying them. My father wasn't buying them either because he didn't know whether they were good or bad, and that cut down on his business. I went to work for a hardware store down the street as a delivery boy. And now I was making big money then. I was working after school, and I was working on Saturday, and I got $7. And it was an unusual name, Coin and Coin was the name of it. What made a recollection that I have is that he was showing me how to make keys on a machine there. That you put the key here and the blank here, and then you push it up against it, and it cuts into it. And I said, now, that's a real Mahariki. And he leaned over and says, are you Jewish? I said, sure. We didn't know it. Here, my name is Joe Jacobs, and these guys don't know that I'm Jewish. And up until that time, they had been talking in Yiddish among each other, apparently figuring that I didn't know what it was. I don't remember saying anything that they shouldn't have said. But I never will forget that all of a sudden it struck me. Now that's strange. I know I'm Jewish. I know that people ought to know it. And here are two men who are both Jewish, and they don't know it. I worked there. I saved up my money on that at the rate of $7. Some of it I wanted to give to my mother, and she kept saying, no, you save it when you go off to college. And sure enough, I won the scholarship that paid my tuition, but it didn't pay my board and lodging. It meant I had to do something. When I went up to Cornell, what happened there was that I went to work. I worked in the music department long enough to get a ticket. The worst in the house, in Bailey Hall, behind a post where I could hear the concerts. Arthur Rubinstein, I heard him for the first time in my life at Bailey Hall. And as soon as I got that, I would look for something else because the music department would give you tickets, but they wouldn't give you money. I worked washing windows. I worked taking care of babies. Primarily, though, I worked in the agriculture department. They would plow up the potatoes, and I would help pick potatoes. And if you think that's an easy job, you're mistaken, because it'll break your back after a while, because you're bending and you're picking them up, and you're dragging a box, and you're throwing the potatoes into the box. And when you fill that up, there are boxes, that they've spread along the rows, and you start with another, and you do that. I picked apples. Well, you don't climb up on a tree to pick apples. They have great big poles. Those professionals who worked for the college on a regular basis, they would shake the apples down. We never shook them down. They shook them down. They're on the ground, and we're picking up apples. That's another back-breaking thing. When we got through with that, so they want to know, they got to thrash some clover. You want to try? I said, sure. 25 cents an hour to me, that whatever it was. And that's another incident that sticks in my mind.
Did you pick potatoes up near Ithaca or
at Ithaca?
And like the College of Agriculture.
That's right. The College of Agriculture grew the potatoes. And you see, they grew them for two reasons. One, to supply the cafeterias that the college ran, and the eating places that the college ran, and they also had places where they were experimenting with potatoes for whatever the things were that they did. They experimented with all kinds of things. As a matter of fact, Cornell had one of the finest ag schools that there was, because Cornell was one of those things that was state supported, was privately supported, and I think there was one other thing. Was a tripod thing where it enabled them to do a number of things that other schools couldn't do. So I said, okay, we'll thrash clover. And I go without gloves or anything else. It takes me about 15 minutes. And I've got blisters on my hands, and those blisters are breaking, and my hands are getting bloody. And those guys, they thought it was the funniest damn thing in the world. Here, this city slicker, comes to college, and he's going to thrash clover. And they're wearing gloves, and they've got bunions on their hands, and they're used to it. And that pitchfork kept getting heavier and heavier and heavier. And I was determined that I was going to stick it out. I didn't give a damn what happened. But I want you to know that the next day I couldn't work. My hands were swollen. I couldn't hold a pencil in my hand either. I was just a damn fool. And that was almost the end of my career, except I didn't come the following day. But the day after that, I came, and my hands are all bandaged up. I've put stuff on them. The guys was sorry for me. They'd already had the joke. They were sorry. The joke. They were sorry. So what they had me do was, there were some chores around the barn there where they had a lot of cows and things to do where I could handle it and it wouldn't be hard on me. And until my hands began to heal up, they shifted me over to that. But I found out that I wasn't cut out for that. Oh, I remember there was a guy who had a falling out with his gal, and he was an upperclassman. I think he was a senior. And he kept saying that he was going to kill himself, he was going to do this, he was going to that. So his family apparently got worried. They got a hold of whatever the department is at the university that sees about jobs, and they said that they wanted somebody who would stay with him just to keep an eye on him and help him along. Apparently they had all kinds of money because he lived in a little apartment, and in a little apartment in those days, why, that was big stuff. And he was hung up on William Blake, the mystic, the poet.
Sure.
And I go over there, and he wants to know how come, and I tell him that they sent me over. And, oh, yeah, he says, that's... And he started cussing his people, that they were trying to keep an eye on him. They were messing in his business and all that. But anyway, I heard more Blake than you can believe. And what I didn't hear, he kept reading the darn stuff. Well, he didn't read, he'd get me to read. But I lived real well because he was eating well. And, of course, when I'm there and supper came, instead of me going on back to my place, he says, stay on, and we fixed supper, and we ate stuff. And I don't mind telling you, the time that I was up there, by and large, I had a little old Sterno can in my room, several of them, that I used to use. My diet was potatoes. I had a whole corner full of potatoes with a newspaper underneath them, of course, Atlanta. I lived in a private house there because it was cheaper than the dorm was. And I put the paper underneath because the landlady would raise hell when I didn't. And one corner was the potatoes and the other corner was the apples. And that was my diet. I ate potatoes cooked, fried, mashed, broiled, you name it. Any way it was. Apples, the same thing. The time that I ate good was when a package came from home. My mother would send something that she'd cooked up and send it up to me. I ate real well. And I smile about it because I was sharing a room with a young man who was the same as I, started when I did and went on through. And his people were pretty well off, but he was as stingy as they make them. If I didn't have any money to spend, he didn't have to spend any money. I'm working and eating potatoes. He's helping me eat potatoes. I'm trading him, though, some potatoes for some of the stuff that he is able to buy. And I remember I used to get a quart of milk a day. I used to have a box of prunes around all the time. And I figured that takes care of me. I had apples, I had
Four major
potatoes,
foods.
I had prunes, I had milk. That gave me all the stuff. He used to get a lot of fruit from his people. I would get some fruit. That's how I would trade him an apple for an orange or whatever it was. And that was pretty much the size of it.
I can't believe that there were very many other students from working backgrounds at Cornell at that time.
Not really. And the reason I say that is because of all of the students. Well, to begin with, it's right after I started going, one of the fraternities got in touch with me to rush me. So when the guy said something about joining and I began to ask the questions, I said, no chance. I said, I haven't got that kind of money. Come on. So sure enough, I go over there for one time, and they, throw a big shindig and a party. They do the rushies, or what do they call this? One rushies.
Pledges or something.
Yeah, the pledges, and to see if they could get people to pledge. One time, and then I told the guy that was trying to get me to come, I said, hey, there's not a chance. I haven't got that kind of money. So I was what they called an independent and didn't belong to any fraternity while I was up there. Those were rough days. In the summertime, I worked at a hotel on Long Beach, Long Island, with other college boys. They paid us $50 a month and food. We could keep our tips. They had cots in like a flat penthouse on top of the roof that had been built out there where we slept, and we were lined up in cots just like in a barracks, because there were a number of us young fellows there. And we switched around. We worked as so many days, I think it was a week, as a bellhop, so many days as a clerk behind behind the desk, and then so many days what we call taking care of the guests. What was that? That was primarily when they played cards in the evening. We would see to it that they had the drinks that they wanted, the cigarettes and whatever. We were their errand boys for them. And that was on the basis of getting the tips. And what we did, we put all of our tips in a pool. And we trusted each other. And we'd exchange information as to which guest was good and which one was bad with the tips and so on. And we used to like to work at the card games, because they would come even though they were in the evenings, because that if somebody was a good winner, hell, he wouldn't mind giving us some extra money. And we made pretty good money. I think during the summer I would make from $350 to $400.
That's good money.
And that was good money in those days, and that would be sufficient almost to take care of the food and the board. Because if I remember correctly, it was $7 for the room, I think, for the month. What we had was, we had one big room and one little room, and in the big room we had a cot that I would sleep in one week, and in this little room we had one room which I would sleep in. The other time it was a narrow place with a little dresser, and then there was a place with a couple of desks where we could work, and here's the potatoes and here's the apples over there. And it was, if you would tell me that I was going to forget the name of the street, I would never believe it, but I don't remember it right now. And that's where we lived, and that's the kind of work that we did. And I guess it was a good experience. I laugh about it, though, thinking about it, because in those days, they what we would try to do when we took care of the card games, they would want to get a drink, or they might want to get a sandwich or something. We'd go down to see in the kitchen to see the cook. That's where I learned what the third cook was. The third cook was the one that peeled the potatoes. And there was a Cuban young fella there who had left home and had signed up on a ship as the third cook, thinking that he could learn to be a cook. He found out that all he was doing on the ship was sitting down the hold, getting sicker than hell because of the fumes and peeling the potatoes, and his hands were getting raw because from the potatoes it began to get raw. And he was the one who was still third cook, but then they were giving him a shot at cooking breakfast.
Okay.
That's the first step up. And I remember talking with him and learning something about Cuba. That's where I got the idea that I ought to continue on with my Spanish in college, because Cuba and South America were so close to this end of the world that I figured that knowing Spanish would be good. What we did, they would feed us college characters the same stuff they fed the rest of the help. Well, here we are serving this good food and beautiful cakes and pies and desserts and everything else. So we turned around and got the guy who was the second cook, who most of the time would stay on after the chef went on home and got through his supper and everything else. And he loved the gals, and he would be off during the mornings and on the beach. And we would tell him who was a good-looking gal and who would come in here or whatever, and we would know who they were. And some of our guys, we would turn shifts. When we got to that portion of the history which dealt with the American Revolution, oh hell, it shows you our names get away from him, because you don't think of him for 11 years. He was a real well-known historian, and his class in American history was an amazing thing. I can remember that in the course of the discussions that he led with us, Tom Paine, for example, that in his mind was one of the real heroes, and when he got through, why, you had a real feeling for it. And the Federalist, by the time we got through dissecting that and studying that, why, we knew all of the pros and the cons and why certain things were done in the Declaration of Independence and the Articles of Confederation, and then the Constitution, and then the Bill of Rights, and everything else that went with it. Because number one, he made it interesting. Number two, he was as inspiring as could be, and he got you to read. There was a lot of reading in history. And when you got through with his class, you had read it because you had wanted to read it if you had any. I laugh about one thing, though. He lectured in a class that, I guess must have been 200 people. That was one of the very big ones. Most of the classes were never that big in those days. And I know that this was at the beginning of a term, and he starts lecturing, and he looks around and doesn't say anything. He keeps on talking. Finally he says, "I keep hearing a noise. What in the world is it?" One of the one of the freshmen who was taking the course had a typewriter in there, was trying to type his notes. You talk about being embarrassed, and the reason I remember it so well is because the guy was sitting close to me, and while he's typing, it makes it a little more difficult, to hear what the man's saying. And when he finally had to stand up and got embarrassed, we all roared there. But he was one of the ones that inspired me. There was, I don't remember, a professor of English who taught composition, writing, literature, that sort of thing, who was a fantastic person too, who all you had to do was mention the book and he knew the plot, the writer, everything else about it. I used to be amazed, that he had that much knowledge in those days, and I can see now why I was amazed, because I knew so little, he knew so much, and it just flowed with him. It was no real problem. I didn't get inspired by mathematics. I found that to be a very difficult thing. And then I finally wound up, for some reason they had a class there of calculus and analytics, and why the hell they did, I don't know, but at that time it was one of those things that they said was required. And I take it, and I haven't had some of the solid geometry or whatever the hell trig that you're supposed to have in advance of it, and I'm sweating blood on the thing. And I make up my mind that, well, if I can just get through with this class, no more. And that's one of the reasons why at one time, at that time in my life, civil engineering was a big deal, and they were starting to fix roads because automobiles were getting to be more popular at that time. This is in your 20s, And
Cornell had a big engineering.
That's right, and Cornell had all kinds of engineering. You name it, they had it. And part of the curricula was that you had to wind up with physics and with chemistry as part of the required subjects. Now, whether that was to move you into engineering or not, I don't know, but they figured that makes it a rounded sort of thing. So that's the size of it. That's the part of it. And at that time, I almost forgot this. At that time, in Cornell, every able-bodied male was supposed to take ROTC.
Is that right?
And Joe Jacobs don't like ROTC. And I don't take ROTC. And at the end of each term, they call me in, the dean of men or whatever, his assistant or whoever, doing all right, but how come you haven't taken ROTC? And I remember the last time I went in there, and he kept telling me, you keep putting it off, you're going to try to graduate without having it, and we're not going to let you graduate. Meantime, I've learned that the closer you get to it, the less they're going to push you, because they figure that if you're doing okay, particularly, they won't do it. And we had a group, and I can't remember the name of it now. The socialists were part of it, and we used to get together every so often with what you call, it's not banners, but like a picket sign, and we'd fix up on the sign, Cornell doesn't need the ROTC. Why do we have to go serve in the Army? Is is a liberal education. To have a liberal education, do you have to be a soldier, stuff like that on them. And then I remember one summer, and this was between working in on the island, and there's a week, 2 weeks on each end. There was a big demonstration at City College of New York against the ROTC, where they also were requiring them to do it, and as a result of which, and I think it was that year that they finally were able to knock it out of the university, and they knocked it out. But it was a number of years afterwards that in Cornell it became then an elective thing. But if they threw anybody out, I don't know it. I think that what they were doing was the threat they figured would work, and that would be the answer to it.
And you were 2 years or 3 years at Cornell?
2.
2 years.
That's right. And then in large measure, the reason that I did not go longer was because of the money. Because things had gotten bad with the family. And my dad was moving back this end of the world. They had moved to Atlanta. And
while you were at Cornell?
Yeah. And my mother had died during the summertime. It was in August, just before I was supposed to go back to school. He had moved to Atlanta, couldn't find anything, had gone down to West Palm Beach. He had a sister whose husband had gone down there from Winston-Salem. The boom was on in Florida at that time. It hadn't broke yet. And he went down there, tried to see if he could find something to do. Couldn't really find anything. Went to work with I guess it was his brother-in-law. He was running a furniture store and an appliance store, not electric appliances, because this is still early. They had refrigerators yet. Right. The electric ones would maybe just begin to come out, if then.
Still ice boxes.
Yeah, ice boxes. And he went to work there, and I came on down there between the work and going back to school. My mother, who had been sick, went to the hospital. They told her that it was something to do with her female reproductive organs, and they operated on her. And when they did, they said she was eaten up with cancer. She was a woman in her 40s. It was real shock to all of us. That plus all the rest of the things, and I decided I'm not going back. At first I took a furlough, I guess you'd call it, a leave on the scholarship, where it permitted me to come back and continue and have the full scholarship, but I didn't lose it. By the end of that year, things had gotten, the boom had begun to bust down there. We come on back to Atlanta. I come up here. I start looking around. I find out that if I complete a law degree in Cornell, that I have to take a bar exam here. If I go to the night law school, I don't have to take the bar exam. So we chew at it, we figure, what should we do? at that time was going with my wife, who I had met down in West Palm Beach. Not Temele, but Harris's mother. And we talked. I talked with her family. I talked with my family. Finally came to the conclusion that if Dad was coming here, we were going to settle in Atlanta, that I would come up here. I would go to the night law school. I would work during the day. And when I graduated, I'm ready to practice law. In the meantime, I'm learning people who are here. They had a Workman Circle branch here. They had one down in West Palm Beach at the time, too. The one here in Atlanta was the biggest in the South, the most active and everything else. We figured that gives me at least a push and a start. And sure enough, that's what we did. My dad wanted to open another meat market here, couldn't finance the thing. So what he finally wound up doing was that through his brother-in-law, who had the furniture thing, Rose, that he got a line of credit from the same people which he guaranteed. And right here on Marietta Street, where the Omni is, where there used to be the Seelig Paper Company down there, and we used to be right in the next little old block there, a little old furniture place. He got into the installment business. I'm looking for a job. I can't find anything. I wind up being an installment salesman and collector, and I hated it with a passion, because I'm old enough now to understand what this business is, and this business is that you buy something, you double it or triple it, and you sell it to these poor devils who pay you 50 cents a week. And while it's good in one way, it ain't in the other way. And if they can't work and can't pay, and they can't pay you that 50 cents, you can't take it back because it's used, especially these shares, spreadsheets, pillowcases, linens, whatever. The furniture, okay, it doesn't look so bad. You polish it up or you fix it up if it's scratched. But I didn't have any heart for this business when it can't pay. And a lot of times I remember they used to say, well, here, take it back. We can't pay for it. We've lost our job. We're going to move in with our family. And I don't want to take the damn thing back. I feel worse than they do about the damn thing. And so I finally wind up, I think it was 2 years at it. I graduate. I come out of law school in June of 29. The first year there, I was top man in my class. The second, the final year there, I was the second man in my class. I was on the debating team. I was on the declamation team. I got all kinds of, I got a law book as a prize. I got something else as a prize, all this other business. And in the meantime, I had gotten married to the gal that I was going with down in Florida. And I started looking around, where can I practice law? So I had run into a lawyer, a Jewish lawyer by the name of Ike Wingro, who was supposed to be a good lawyer and had been around for some time. They said, go up and talk to him. So I go up and talk to him. My dad, when he opened up this store, had gotten a lawyer. I don't remember his name. It was Calhoun and somebody else. But this lawyer was a real fine person, did a lot of business practice. And I remember my dad goes up there one time to see him. He says, come on up. He wants me to introduce him to this man. Maybe I got a chance of working for him, And my dad asked him, well, what do you think of him practicing law? And I never will forget, he says to him, well, there's one thing about the practice of law. If you want to work, and you do work, you can make a living at it. But he says, and I'm paraphrasing his words. Most lawyers, though, you can't get out and advertise for clients. You can't go knocking on doors. So he says they sit in the office and wait for people to come. And while they're waiting, they get lazy. And then when they do start coming, they're so lazy that they don't do the work that they ought to do. And as a result, a lot of them don't wind up practicing law. But he says, if you will work, you can do it. So, try with Ike Wengrow. I can't get on with him. He was over in the First National Bank building. There was another lawyer that was with a Haas firm, Joe Brown. I go up to see him. He says, no chance of it. But he says, we're getting ready to have a lot of collections. He and a man named George Tidwell. And I think Tidwell later became a judge. But he says some of the accounts are so small, we're not going to want to handle them. We'd rather handle a business account. If they're personal accounts, we'll see if we can throw some your way. So I see Ike Wengrow one day, and he says, I've got just the place that I think you ought to go. He says, John McCallum. He says, John is a good old Irishman. He's a sole practitioner. He's not a guy that's hell-bent for running and going and doing. And he says he's a little older than most lawyers who have been practicing longer than him, because he used to be the court reporter in the federal court, and then decided he wanted to practice law, went to law school, started practicing law, so he's a lot older than most. He's just that temperament. And he says, and he's just now become president of the Atlanta Bar, and that'd be a good thing. So I go up to see him, and he's not interested. When I get ready to leave, I said, but all I'm trying to do is just come in your office. It's not a question of paying me anything. He says, well, he says, I've never tried it. He says, I tried it one time, and he says that just about the time this man got where he was worth something to me, he left and started on his own. I think the young man was Malavis, Malavis, a Greek Catholic. He represented a lot of Greeks who were Catholics, but not Roman Catholics, but Greek Catholics. And he represented a lot of Lebanese. I was amazed. In the people he represented, he was Lebanese, there were Greeks, there were Armenians, there were Jews, and a whole hodgepodge of a mixture. Mm-hmm. Don't ask me how he got them, except I think because they were mostly Catholics, except for the Jewish group. Anyway, I keep looking, I can't find anything. I finally go up to see him again. And apparently at that time he says, well, let's try it. Because apparently he'd gotten used to this young man running titles for him. I did not know it at that time, though. And titles are boring as hell to run in detail. And he did a fair amount of real estate practice. So sure enough, he has a reception room, which is half the size of this room. I guess it must have been about 8 foot by about 12 or 14 feet, in which his secretary sat with a desk that the typewriter folded into the desk, and then it's smoothed, straightened out. She sat there, and he was in a private office himself, which is not quite as big as this office is, which would mean it'd be about, 10 feet by 12 or 15 or something like that. And we arranged for me to have a little table that's about 30 inches by about 18 inches right next to her desk, and with a chair in front of it that I can sit and work at. And if there's a telephone call, the telephone is on that end of her desk, so she can use it. I can use. She answers the phone, and if I have to talk, I get on the phone. Wasn't an extension; it was on her phone.
Right.
And the arrangement was that whatever work he gave me to do, we would arrange what the fee would be. Any work that I got that I handled primarily myself, he would get 1/3. I got 2/3. That meant that if I made a $10 fee, and those were big fees, he got $3.33. And that's the basis on which I went to work with him. First thing he wanted me to do was run titles, and I found out what they were, and I learned how to run titles, and it was the bane of my existence. But at least each time I ran a title, I got $10. Each time I ran a title, I got $10. And I did not have to share that with him because it was $10 to me. But in order to make a living, on Saturdays, I arranged to go to work for a member of the Workmen's Circle, whom I had gotten to know, a man named Nathan Stoller, an immigrant who came here. He was on Forest Avenue, which is the street now that
Ralph McGill.
the Ralph McGill, and in Butler Street. Butler Street was,
Right.
if you continued to run, ran into his store, and on the right-hand side of him was Max Kramer, another Workman's Circle member who had a little grocery store. He had a little grocery store, and a man named Smith right next to him. 3 good Jewish grocers. 2 of them belonged to the Workman's Circle. And then right across the street from where Smith was another grocer, Jewish man, I don't remember his name. And then on the other corner was a Greek grocery store. That was like a little mall, except there was regular streets there. And if you went down there on Saturdays, and just up the street, about 250 feet, was a man named Schaefer, another Jewish man who ran a grocery store. Now, he had a big grocery store already. He was about twice the size of these other guys, and the competition was the keenest you ever saw in your life. But be that as it is, I went to work on Saturdays for him, and the arrangement was that I would get my groceries from him. Now, when we talk about groceries, that means that I got the staples. I also could buy some meat. We would figure out if it's a little too much, I had to pay. If it wasn't too much, okay. And he was a good guy. I don't mind telling you. He could have made it tough for me on the meat and fish part of it, but he didn't. And the amazing thing about it was that at that time he had a black delivery boy. His name just flashed through my mind. But be it as it is, Henry. Never knew his last name. I want you to know that Henry started off as his delivery boy. His family lived in one of the black houses right around in that neighborhood. It was all black in there. That's right, all black there. And Henry got so that his Yiddish, he would hear Stoller and his wife talk, and he'd hear me talk. He got so that he was as adept in Yiddish as you would ever believe. And he trained himself to be a butcher. In the latter years, some years later, when I would go by there, Henry is the butcher, and he's taking care of the customers, and people know him as well as they know Mr. Stoller. And I look at Henry, and here's Henry with an automobile. In those days, this is doing darn good, and it's not an old Palooka. It's a nice-looking automobile, and he lives in there was a duplex about a block and a half away. He moved into the duplex, and he was arranging to buy the thing. I handled the papers. That's the reason I know, because when he started doing it, Stoller brought him up to me and said told me what he was doing, and he was going to help him. As a matter of fact, I think he helped him put up the down payment on the thing. But I want you to know that a lot of the people who traded there who were black would listen to him talking in Yiddish to Stoller, and they'd sort of look, and trying to figure out what is it that he's going on. They look at him, they know he's not Yiddish, he's a black, and here he is talking with this man, and they know that Stoller is Jewish, and they wonder what's going on. And to help finish the story, when the Depression came along and Roosevelt closed the banks, and I'm still working at it. This is, I started in 29. This must have been 33, I think.
Spring of 33.
Yeah, this is 33. So what has happened? The banks are closed. Nobody has any cash. I owe rent on the apartment that I'm living on Atlanta Avenue. In the meantime, I think 2 of the children were already born, Harris and his middle brother. And my rent is due, and I haven't got the $25, and I'm concerned about it because the people that own the place are real sticklers on paying the rent, regardless.
Right.
So I remember going down there and seeing Mr. Stoller, and I get my groceries and everything, and we're talking about it and so on, and I tell him I got a real problem. What's your problem? Problem is that I got to pay rent, means $25. Zorg says, don't worry, Joe. He says, I still have cash. I didn't make the last deposit because he used to have cash for Saturday, you see. On Mondays when he made the deposit. If it was things were real good, he might make another deposit during the week. Hadn't made his deposit. So sure enough, he's the one that gave me the $25. And I'm telling you, when I gave it to my landlord there, so I remember kidding him saying I ought to get a real discount. Nobody else has money, and nobody did until they opened the bank. I think it was a week later when they started flowing money again. But that helped me get through it, and those were tough days.
So what did you do for Stoller?
For Stoller?
For Stoller.
I was a clerk.
You were a clerk.
I sold groceries. I wrapped groceries. I cut meat. I did whatever had to be done. I was his extra hand on Saturday, because during the week Henry and he took care of it. On Friday night, his wife would come in and help, and she would help him on Saturday, and they would be open a half a day on Sunday, even though you're not supposed to, because all the grocers at that time were open a half a day on Sunday. That what they would do is they would come down on Sundays allegedly to take inventory, to see what they needed to order and that sort of thing. And if a customer came by, he would knock, and the customer would knock on the door. They'd let them come in. They'd look around to make sure that nobody saw that they were selling them something. If they did come in and the police and try to see what was going on, they said she bought it yesterday, but she left the package here. He came by for it today, and they would always mark the preceding day's date on the package so that they could get by with it. And I did that for a considerable period of time. But of course, if you want to know how else I did, my practice was primarily collections. Collections for what? For groceries. A lot of the people in the workman circle ran little grocery stores. M.J. Merlin, who was the key man in the organization, had one on Formwall Street, right opposite the school over there. So they give me these accounts. They extended credit to everybody. They would pay, and this history most of the time was that those who were good would pay off each week and continue to do it. But sooner or later there was a crisis when the crisis came, they had to miss. They couldn't quite pay it off. And then the next thing you know, they owed $10 in the back amount, and then it was $20, and then kept building. Then those who really used their heads would say, okay, look, I'm going to continue to buy from you in the little grocery store and pay you as I buy, and then I'll try and put $1 or $2 or $5 on the old amount. Those who were not smart, when they ran up a bill and he started saying, look, you got to begin to pay a little bit on the old one because I can't keep carrying it, would quit. And they wouldn't trade with him anymore, and they wouldn't pay.
Right, sure.
Then I got the account.
That's a thankless task.
435, I suspect it was, when Zaritsky and Dubinsky came down here. Dubinsky coming in first and Zaritsky coming immediately after that. As a matter of fact, I think it was after the first time that Dubinsky came here that Zaritsky came down here with him. And then he began working on the Hatter's plant, because at that time there were four Hatter's plants. Saul Klinberg was here in Atlanta. That was a big dress shop that had about 400 people. And that's when I got involved in the trade union movement here. And
although you've been with the textile workers already here in 34.
With the textile workers in the 34, due to the 34 strike, and through the Forward, and through Jack Rich, and through, through Zaritsky. Because, well, you see, my father came out of this same group of revolutionaries. He knew Dubinsky, he knew Zaritsky, he knew Belsky. I'm trying to.
Of the Hatters,
yeah, there was a Zuckerman. There was who preceded Dubinsky and the garment workers. He knew him real well too. I'm going to have to think these names again, because these were the people who were also active in the workman's circle. And when he was down here, but not a member of the union down here, he was a member of the meat cutters union when he was in New York, and he kept his membership down here. In all the bad times, by the way, he always paid his dues. So that when he finally retired, they gave him a life membership. And of course, before he retired, he had a big fight with the Birmingham business agent. They wanted to throw him out. They filed charges against him. He went through the charges. When he appealed it to the International kicked the charges out on him. You know, it was a political deal.
Right.
He's survived the guy who was the business agent there, and when he finally retired, they gave him a gold membership card, which my stepsister has. And he was proud of that, as if you'd given him $1 billion, you know. And he was the picket for when he retired and went to Florida. So that he next thing he did, he went to see the butcher's local down there. What was his name? Fellow with a P. It's a funny name. It's I keep thinking Papandreas, but he was not Papandreas. A Greek. This was a Yiddish guy with the names with a P, a Yiddish German, and he was having problems keeping pickets on his picket lines. All he had to do was call up Morris. He'd go down because he wasn't doing anything. He was retired and he'd carried the picket line. He, not only that, but in the Miami Herald, do you remember when they had the strike down there? Everybody thought he was a printer. They didn't know him because he was always on the damn picket line, picketing for him. And as far as taking a dime for it, he wouldn't take a dime for it. In the meantime, he was good with his hands. When the Workman's Circle bought a building down in Florida as a lyceum where they were going to hold their meetings, he and another man turned around and rewired, replumbed, rebuilt wherever it needed to be done, that whole structure that they did there. And I can remember my stepmother used to get after him about at his age, crawling under the building there, running the wires and the plumbing and all this other crap around there. But he was fantastic in terms of using his hands.
Oh, yeah.
They used to kid him though when he got to where he couldn't handle something. He'd say, "Well, if I just had the right tool, I could do it." So whenever anything happened and he was working at it, they would keep kidding him. If you got the right tools,
Right.
As a matter of fact, my kid sister was married in the Workman Circle Lyceum when she got married in Miami. In Miami, that's the one that they built that, not the one here. And the one, of course, is right there. You know where the juvenile court is?
Yeah, right, on Capitol Avenue.
Yeah, well, it was on the corner of Fulton and Capitol Avenue. As a matter of fact, I had a couple of pictures that I talked on this last conference we had on the, I think it was the 61st anniversary of the Southern Region, the 90th anniversary of the Workman Circle, about the history of the Southern Region, and I had accumulating a number of pictures, including this picture of the Schuller bus with the kids sitting in it and some of the parents standing in the front of it. It has the old pneumatic tires on it with the holes that you can see through. That's on the wheel that those tires you didn't puncture.
Right.
They were followed by a tire which had a tube in and which you could puncture, but which you did not take the wheel off, but you took the tire off with the irons. And that was right on the corner of Fulton and Capitol, which is opposite where the Ramada is, right at that area there. And when the English-speaking group, the young people, came along, we put up a basketball court in the backyard of the Lyceum, is what we called it.
Because I've seen, somebody showed me a photograph of a team called the Ironians.
Yeah.
I think that was out of the Alliance.
Yeah, that came out of the Alliance, which was 3 blocks back this
Right.
way. And they're over there closer to Memorial Drive on Capitol Avenue. And that's where one of the Merlins, there was 7 of them, 7 brothers here, and a couple of sisters. They ranged all the way from a Merlin who was a commie, a Morris Merlin, Mitchell Merlin, who was a good socialist, what was it? Max Merlin, who ran the only kosher restaurant, the only kosher deli at that time, and sold these religious articles. The talit, the yamoki, the finger, that they use in reading the Torah, the goblets, the mezuzahs. If you didn't buy a mezuzah from him, you didn't buy it in this town. And he was right there opposite where the Alliance was. And as a matter of fact, I have one of the old pictures that we have is of the English-speaking group in the Alliance. And that's an oldie, too. And that was the place where we had a meeting when Hitler first came along, and we were talking about boycotting the Germans. And I was there talking for the Workman Circle. And in the course of my talk, I said that we not only ought to boycott them, but we ought to boycott the communists for what they were doing to the Jewish people and for what they were doing to dissenters. And some of my commie friends who were sitting in the audience there gave me the booze. And afterwards, while they were arguing with me, raising hell and everything else, and among them was this Merlin, this Morris Merlin. He later on migrated down to Florida. Then there was a David Merlin who ran a wholesale grocery or a block up this way where the Georgia State is now. He had a grocery on Decatur Street, a wholesale grocery where he sold to other grocery stores and then delivered. And they still have a place. Well, he is gone. Dave Merlin is gone. His son Louis Merlin, who succeeded him, is gone. And his grandsons are now running it. It's Merlin's, I think they call it supply company now, Institutional Grocers.
Okay.
You'll see a truck running around this town that has that on it. And this is that makes it 1, 2, 3. This is the 4th generation of the Merlin family. And at one time, they were the big family here. Just like there's an Oberdorfer family. They used to have a lot of people here. There was, what was the insurance man? There was an insurance man here.
Don.
Yeah, Don Oberdorfer, but his this must be his his granddaughter, who is Carolyn Oberdorfer, who's active in some Sandy Springs organizations up there now. But then there was another one who was in the insurance business. Oh, shoot. They used to carry insurance, not Oberdorfer, but there was another Jewish man who was a big family here. In other words, just like the Baum family. That's part of what Norma's family comes from, is the Baum. Her mother was a Baum. He was one of the first people in insurance in this town, and got to know everybody that way. And he had how many daughters? I think they were all daughters. I don't know whether he had a son. He must have had 6 or 7 daughters, and everybody knew him. And when he was around, he was a great big man. They remind me of John Wesley Dobbs, if you remember. He was a great big fella, weighed 300 pounds, big voice, everything else. Well, he was the same way in the community. And if he was in the synagogue, you knew it. You knew it. He was there, and he was everywhere. He was a real macher, as we call it. Fantastic character. And he was part of the hierarchy around here. I'm trying to remember what was the name, because there was 2 brothers, and one of them, the last one, I think, died within recent time. Can't think of their names now. It'll come to me. It's funny how you don't think of names and they get away from you, and then all of a sudden,
Flash.
it comes.
All right. Well, why did I call
All right.
you toward the end of the